Riding motorcycles is a very expensive hobby. Buying these machines can cost you quite a lot, especially if you are paying for it all up front, which is why a lot of riders decide to go with finance options, whether that be hire purchase or personal contract purchase. So what's the difference and what are the pros and cons to each? Well, the ZZR I own on hire purchase. The ZH2 on the other hand I own on PCP. So in today's video we're going to jump on the ZZR, we're going to go for a ride, and I'm going to give you my experiences of both and which I recommend. Let's jump right in. Yeah, I don't think it's any secret, guys, that buying one of these monsters, or buying any motorcycle, in fact, isn't cheap. So it does make sense when we want to be able to pay for these things on contracts and loans and leases and what have you. It can start to get a bit complicated, especially when it comes to what you're allowed to do with the bike once you have it in your possession. But yeah, we're going to get into all of those details in due course, but definitely let me know in the comments, guys, what you think about this. You know, how you have bought your motorcycles. Do you buy them on PCP or hire purchase or something else, in fact? Yeah, drop that in the comments and let us know how you have felt with your decision. So yeah, I mean, in the past I've only ever really done hire purchase, HP, for buying my motorcycles. The ZH2 is the first one where I've decided to go PCP. The main reason why you would choose PCP over anything else is simply because it's going to be cheaper for you from a monthly finance perspective. Now, PCP is a weird thing because you do not own the motorcycle, and I think this is the biggest con behind PCP contracts. You do not own the vehicle until the end of the contract period, where you have an option to pay off the remainder of your loan, I suppose, or pay off the remainder of the vehicle. And you have to do that up front. So, I mean, I suppose in theory you could get another hire purchase agreement for the rest of the vehicle, but yeah, the biggest con is that the motorcycle isn't yours for the first 3-4 years, depending on how long your contract is. It isn't yours. Now, that's not to say that it isn't yours. I mean, you're still going to be riding it yourself, you're still going to be doing all the maintenance yourself. Basically, it's going to be yours in all but name, in effect. Now, there is a few caveats to buying on PCP. So the main one being, when you're looking at buying a motorcycle, is the motorcycle cannot be any more than 5 years old, I believe. At least if what the salesman at the dealership was saying last time I was looking at a ZH2. And this is the crazy thing, guys. When I was looking to buy my ZH2, I did originally look used because I thought, well, that's going to be cheaper, it's going to be more cost effective and all that stuff. But of course it was only going to be on hire purchase. Unfortunately, the places that were selling these ZH2 used ZH2s, they were only selling on hire purchase. They weren't doing PCP contracts, which is a bit of a shame, really, because I probably would have gone for one of them. But it turns out that that was more expensive, even though it was £3,000–4,000 off the price of a new one, and it was only a year old and had pretty low mileage, less than 5,000 miles, I think, from memory. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, those are the kinds of bikes that I was looking at when I was trying to get hold of a ZH2. And in the end I was like, well, if a PCP contract is going to be more cost effective for me per month than buying hire purchase, then, well, that's pretty much my only option. And that's the thing as well, that even though it was more expensive, it wasn't that much more expensive, maybe by about 20 quid or so, 30 quid per month. But I was getting a new motorcycle, so I didn't really have to worry about it too much. It was a brand spanking new motorcycle. So I thought it was the best purchase for me personally, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone. A hire purchase, when you're buying a motorcycle on a hire purchase, I think everyone knows this. Buying a hire purchase motorcycle, it means that you basically own it. So instead of a company owning the bike and you basically renting it from them over a set period of time, you are actually just getting a loan for it, in effect. So you own the motorcycle, but you're paying off a loan every month, which is kind of like the standard thing. That's been, hire purchase has been the standard thing for a long time. But when vehicles started getting more expensive and people weren't able to afford brand new cars and brand new motorcycles, I think that's when we started seeing a lot more PCP options available. But I haven't experienced this myself, but I can see it. I can see someone else doing this, and that is riding it differently to how you normally would. If you buy a motorcycle on hire purchase, would you ride it differently to a motorcycle on PCP? Because any damage that you cause to the bike, at least that doesn't fit within usual wear and tear, or what they say is fair wear and tear, you're going to have to fix, and you'll have to pay up front for all of those costs to make sure that basically the bike is in the exact same condition that it was, or as close to the exact same condition as it was when you first bought it. And on a motorcycle, I mean, that's not an easy thing, is it? If you're dropping it, well, yeah, then you're going to have a costly bill. Whereas on hire purchase, you can drop your motorcycle and you can choose whether or not you want to fix it. On PCP, you can't. You don't have that choice. You have to get it fixed. At least you have to get it fixed before you give it back, or before the end of the contract. So yeah, it's a real tough one. It is a real tough one. You're not allowed to mod your motorcycle on PCP either. Well, actually, this is an interesting one that I just thought of. What about frame sliders? Surely frame sliders would be alright, you know? If you put in frame sliders on a motorcycle, does that count as a modification? I mean, it is a modification in some sense of the word, but is it really a modification? And I suppose frame sliders is something that you can just take off afterwards pretty easily, I think. But yeah, I mean, I just had a thought about that, because on the ZX2, of course, I don't actually have frame sliders on it at the moment. But it might be one of those things that I may get in future. I don't know. I have thought about it long and hard, but that might actually throw a bit of a spanner in the works. But yeah, again, so you're not allowed to basically put on any permanent modifications, things that you can't take off again afterwards. Which again, it sucks, because a lot of people, they like to modify their motorcycles to make them more their own, you know, to make them more unique. And I get that, I totally get that. I'm not really much of a modder myself, so again, I don't really fit into this category. I think a lot of this is going to depend on the kind of person you are and the kind of motorcycle you want. If you do want a motorcycle you can tinker with, then a PCP contract is probably not going to be for you. If, however, you don't intend on modifying the bike whatsoever, or you're like me, you're not really into the modding scene all that much, then yeah, all power to you. Doesn't really matter. Yeah. Servicing as well, guys. Now, depending on your contract, PCP contract, you might not be able to service your own motorcycle. This kind of all ties in a little bit into the whole modding and tinkering with your own motorcycle. You might not be able to do it. Some T's and C's will not specify whether you are not allowed to service it yourself. But to be honest with you, I think it's okay. As long as it's done to a satisfactory standard and you're not causing damage to the motorcycle, I think it's okay, but you need to record it. You need to make sure you record it. Yeah. Insurance. Here's another one. Insurance. your PCP contract might dictate to you what types of insurance you have to get for your bike. Now for mine on the ZX2, I'm quite lucky where I have a choice of fully comp, which is what most people will have, or third-party fire and theft. But that's it. You cannot get an insurance policy on my particular contract on a third-party basis or a third-party policy. You just can't do it. Not allowed. So again, I mean, that's just something else, especially if you are looking to buy a motorcycle that's brand new and you're 17, 18 or something like that. When your insurance, you know, is already going to be sky high, you might be forced to buy fully comp when you might not be able to afford it. So again, that's something else to consider when you're looking at the PCP contract. Now I'm saying a lot of negative things about PCP contracts, but the main benefit to take away from them is if you're not into modding, if you are happy to get it serviced at a dealership or get it serviced at an actual mechanic shop and things like that, then you're going to be saving yourself some money, and you're still going to be able to buy, you're still going to be able to afford the motorcycle that you want, rather than having to look elsewhere for another motorcycle because you simply cannot afford it on hire purchase. Yeah, I don't know which threshold, at which point I would consider fair if you are just paying outright for a motorcycle, if you're just going to drop all your money, all your life savings on a motorcycle, what that point would be. I mean, I've spent £3,000 up front on a motorcycle before. That was on the ZX-14r, but that was a private purchase. So I don't know, I'd say maybe up to £4,000. Now the reason why I say that is because my deposit for the ZX2 was £4,000, which is a lot. That is a lot to drop on a motorcycle, and especially because you've only bought like what, a quarter of it, you know? You've only paid for a quarter of what the bike is worth brand new. So yeah, yeah, it kind of sucks when you look at it like that. And there are some people out there that simply wouldn't spend any more than £4,000 on a motorcycle, and yeah, I get it. There's something charming about buying older motorcycles for, yeah, a quarter or a third of the price that you would have paid for them brand new, you know? Yeah, I love buying used bikes, to be honest, I really do. There's something just fun about buying used motorcycles. I don't know what it is, but it's always an experience. Yeah, it's quite funny because a lot of people with cars in particular, I mean, my dad is like this, where he will refuse to buy used. He will not buy ever a used car. And I do understand what it means, because he's had some bad experiences with used cars, and there is always a risk that you take whenever you buy a used vehicle, whether it's a motorcycle or a car, doesn't matter. You are taking a bit of a gamble that it is actually going to be alright. But yeah, I don't know. I've not had any negative experiences buying used yet. The ZX-14r was the biggest risk that I took, but yeah, when I come around to buying that junk bike, that by far would be the biggest risk, especially if I've got to spend close to £1,000 on it. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that personally, but yeah, we will see. Hire purchase, of course, you don't have any restrictions on your mileage either. PCP contract is kind of worked out on the basis of the value of the motorcycle over X amount of time, and of course if that vehicle has got more mileage, then it's going to be worth less. So that's why you agree to a particular mileage. Now me on the ZX2, I think I've got 2,000 miles, which for me is actually perfect. I covered, I think it was 1,700 miles on the ZX2 in my first year, which yeah, I think is pretty good going, especially when I've got this other motorcycle here, the ZZR. I mean, but the ZZR, I don't have to worry about about the mileage, I suppose. So yeah, whenever I am running up a little bit close to the mileage of the ZX2, I can just jump on the ZZR and it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's something else that you will want to consider if you're going to do a lot of long commutes, if you're going to do a lot of longer journeys, then PCP contract doesn't really give you that many options. Imagine if once a year you go to Scotland and you ride, there's a famous route around Scotland, I can't remember what it's called now, but yeah, imagine if you go ahead and do that and you live in London or something. Well, that's going to be a lot of your mileage done after one trip. So yeah, definitely something else to think about for sure if you plan on doing longer journeys once a year or something like that. Again, I don't really do long journeys. I mean, I'll do longer journeys for sure. Maybe up to 100 miles or so. Maybe 200 miles there and back, something like that. But that's as far as I've ever been on a motorcycle, is 200 miles. And that's the return trip as well. So yeah, it's not too bad. But even if you're commuting, say, to London every day and you live in, gosh, I don't know, you live in Brighton, for example, you know, that's going to be a 50-60 mile trip there and back, maybe more than that. It could be closer to 100 miles. 100 miles there, 100 miles back, I don't know, maybe into the centre of London, but these are things that you've got to consider. But yeah, it really does depend on what you intend to do with your motorcycle, as I kind of mentioned earlier. Do you intend to commute with it, or do you just intend to use it as a hobby, you know, just to enjoy on the weekends? Because if it is just to enjoy on the weekends, then PCP contract I think is going to be absolutely perfect for you. But like I said, you have got to watch out for those certain things. Look at the small print, look at the fine print in your contract, make sure you are happy before you sign anything. Make sure that you are happy with what the contract says, because you might end up falling into something that you weren't expecting later on down the line, and they'll be like, oh right, well, that's an extra £1,000 please, because yeah, well, you know what these companies could be like, or can be like. Yeah, any excuse to take just a little bit more money from you, they'll take it. But anyway, guys and gals, I hope that this video has clarified a little bit between hire purchase and personal contract purchase, and this really does only apply to newer motorcycles, really, on the PCP front anyway. So yeah, it's tough. It's really tough, because a lot of the time, like I said, I mean, this same situation as me. I wanted to buy a ZX2, but the only option I had was PCP. I had no other choice. And if that is the situation that you are in, I don't know if that is the best the best situation to be in. I was happy with a PCP contract on the ZX2 anyway, but you might not be. Okay, if there's some things that I've mentioned in today's video that you do not want, you know, you don't want that restriction, then unfortunately PCP is not for you. But yeah, like I said, I hope this has helped you out anyway, if you are kind of umming and ahhing about what kind of contract to get, because it is very tempting. Getting a PCP contract is very tempting, especially if you can afford, if you know you can afford a hire purchase agreement. Then getting a PCP contract is kind of like, well, it's cheaper, so why wouldn't I do that? Well, the reasons I've given you in today's video are why you might not want to do that. But the biggest con that I have at the moment is at the end of the tenure that I have with the ZX2, I have to pay up front £13,000 to buy it outright, which I think is absolutely absurd, but that is the terms and conditions of the contract. So, but I do get the opportunity to give the bike back, which I think I will. At the end of the term, I'm going to give the bike back. But I don't have to give back the ZZR though. Hey! But anyway, yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys and gals. Definitely let me know your thoughts down in the comments and your experiences with PCP, HP contracts, which ones you prefer, and yeah, whether or not you've had any problems with either. I mean, hire purchase is pretty clear cut, to be honest. It's a pretty easy contract to understand. But PCP is where things get, yeah, a little bit less clear. So yeah, hopefully I've dispelled some of that mist, or what's, I don't know what the word is, what the phrase I'm looking for is, but hopefully I've clarified it a little bit more for you. But yeah, thank you ever so much for watching. Thank you for joining me on today's ride. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, hit subscribe as always, and we will catch you all in the next video. Have a good one.